I've been marginalized by the US government, as so many of us have, and I regret that. But I stand before you free, and I wanted to honor Leah Lynn Plante, who was a prisoner of state on the West Coast for basically being a vocal, legal dissident. I believe in America and America the Beautiful. But I'm very, very concerned about our government and the predatory capitalist system that it's supporting. It no longer supports we, the people. And that is something that we need to do something about. And we do that by restoring public agency. Now, how do I turn this here? And then click. Okay, good. So for those of you that either have something else to do or want to be able to come back to this later, I've put up a tiny URL here, OSC-2014, and that takes you right to the briefing. OSC in capital letters -2014. The first and long version of this briefing was given at NOMDEX in Seattle in 2007, and you can find that with a link at that tiny URL. The manifesto and chapters, extracts, are available free online. I deeply regret that I made a bargain with the devil in order to put this book into bookstores. And it is the only one of my 9 books that is not free online. All my other books are free online, but I certainly would be glad if someone decided to buy those very inexpensive books at the back of the room. And I will stay to sign or write obscene messages in any of them. Most of my stuff and the stuff of 800 other people is free online at phi-beta-iota.net. Now, why does open source everything matter? It matters because it's root. We are in a very complex world that is failing. And I just want to show this as a very brief overview. And you can study this later. The 1% are sucking the life out of our world. And they will keep on doing it until we get, as the earlier speaker on the internet pointed out, until we get our autonomous internet. We need an autonomous internet. We need to restore public agency to what we are about. Now, there are some positive trends. And I'm very happy about this. The most singular positive trend is that the Department of Homeland Security and Halliburton have figured out that there aren't enough guns, there aren't enough railway cars with shackles, there aren't enough SWAT teams to keep us all down. We have vastly more power than we really understand and are utilizing. And I will tell you, one of the YouTubes of me briefing Occupy on electoral reform went sort of viral after it hit the front page of Reddit. If Occupy had listened in 2011, today we would have electoral reform. I had to run for president to find out that we have 8 accredited parties in the United States. And we have a 2-party tyranny that is not only blocking access for everybody else, it's borrowing $1 trillion a year in our name in order to keep up this loot fest that they have going. Now, this is a very simplified version of revolution. And this is all by way of framing why open source everything matters. Most critical is the fact that our leaders are betraying the public trust every single day. And I had to read a book called Deer Hunting with Jesus to understand that it's not just Washington. It's every small town across the United States of America. It's the Rotary Club, it's the Elks, it's everybody in the planning council of every small local government that cuts deals with corporations and gives them tax breaks and pollution exemptions, and that basically guts the educational fund of the local community, which is generally based on real estate taxes. We have got to put a people's microscope on all of these. Now, it is not my intent that you study this next slide here and now. I did a graduate thesis on predicting revolution. And this slide is easily found online. You can explode this slide. In red are all of the preconditions of revolution that exist in the United States today. At the highest level of thinking, what this boils down to is a loss of government legitimacy and the fact that the public no longer believes anything the U.S. government says. The unemployment rate today is not 7%. It is closer to 23%. Check out shadowstats.com, a marvelous source of credible, truthful information. At the end of the day, open source is about open mind, transparency, truth, and trust. I love CEO Bob Seeler, New York-based Saatchi & Saatchi. He likes to say, until you get the truth on the table, no matter how ugly it is, you cannot deal with it. We have a government that is not just in denial, it is pathologically against our public interests in every possible sense of the word, across every possible mission area. Now, what is to be done? These are 4 very quick slides before my master slide. I have a sense of timing, so I don't like interruptions on Indigenous natives, but I will tell you that Indigenous natives are core. The book 1491 tells us just how wise our Indigenous forebears were. They would sit down in a council of everybody and they would not leave until everybody agreed. This is how you get to a sustainable decision. They would put all of the facts on the table. They would take the long view, 7th generation thinking. How will this affect the 7th generation? This is not something we do today. I also show here the 8 tribes of information: academic, civil society, commerce, government, law enforcement, media, military, and non-governmental nonprofit. The U.S. government is the least informed of all of these tribes. And until we learn how to do hybrid governance and bring to the table everything that all 8 tribes know, and make decisions based on ethical, evidence-based decision support, we will continue to be, as Lawrence of Arabia so famously called the Arabs, a little people, a greedy people, a stupid people. We don't have a smart nation today, and it's our fault because we are putting up with a stupid government that is out of control. Now, in relation to the objectives of this conference, this is my most important slide. It's a slide I developed over 10 years ago. And the key point here is that open source software, which most people know, or open data, which people are talking about, are completely ineffective in isolation. There is an open source ecology, and you must integrate all of the opens all of the time. You have to have open cloud, open data, open hardware, open government, open software, open spectrum, open standards. These all have to come together because in isolation, for example, open data is code for give me all your data, but you still have to buy my proprietary software. You have to have all of the opens all of the time. I believe the cyber commons is the foundation for humanity's future, and it cannot be enclosed or corrupted or we are lost. Now, back in the day when I had money, I channeled my surplus funds into creating the Earth Intelligence Network. It's an accredited but now unfunded 501c3. I led 23 others in creating this model. And one of the things we realized, and particularly this is pointed out in C.K. Prahalad's book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. Capitalism today, corrupt as it is focused on the 1 billion rich who have an annual aggregate income of $1 trillion a year. The 5 trillion poor have an annual aggregate income of $4 trillion a year. But instead of buying a Sub-Zero refrigerator for $2,000, they are buying a ceramic jar with an air gap inside of another ceramic jar that costs $2, and when buried in the ground, keeps meat fresh for 5 days. We have to redirect capitalism to not only be moral and green, but to focus on the 5 billion poor. And that, again, is a reason for open source. Open source is the only approach that is affordable, interoperable, scalable, and sustainable. And I realize I'm talking to the choir among many of you, but it is a message that has not yet gotten out. And oh, by the way, the New York Times declined an op-ed on this. Now, Medard Gabel, co-creator with Buckminster Fuller of the Analog World game, is a member of our team. And he's the architect of a global game. A digital global game would represent the true cost of all products. Most people have no idea how much water, child labor, tax avoidance, and other crimes are in any given product, service, or behavior. We can move markets overnight. And one of the points that I try to make to my internet colleagues who focus on the internet, and by the way, I'm glad I sat through the whole program because I learned a lot of stuff that I did not know. And I was enormously impressed by Hunter's brief on dark fiber. He's trying to avoid a fight, but I think a fight is inevitable. I was a ghostwriter for the Commandant of the Marine Corps once, and writing testimony for him, speaking to Congress about why the Marine Corps was the only service that had both communications and intelligence under the same general, I coined the phrase, communications without intelligence is noise. Intelligence without communications is irrelevant. The problem that I have with the internet world is they're forgetting about content. The reason we're so screwed up in computers is because back in the 1980s, nobody talked to a librarian. And so we ended up with electronic wastebaskets. We ended up with electronic systems that still today do not make sense. I'm a member with Larry Page of the Silicon Valley Hackers Conference, and I keep saying, when are you going to start making sense? Google today is not about making sense. Google today is about fencing cyberspace. It's about enclosing the commons. It's about charging you for digitizing dead authors' works on whom copyright has expired. Google was thrown out of Boston because the librarians were outraged that Google was trying to claim the right to copyright everything they digitized. Now, I will say that I think Google Earth is very cool. I would like to see it become open source. Keyhole markup language is really, utterly fantastic, but right now it only applies to geospatial information. I want to see keyhole markup language migrate so that we can have a sparse matrix in which all information is available for any given point on the Earth, and you can also follow the provenance of a product from the grapes to the grape crushing, to the bottle, to all of the toxins that come along with that. And eventually the day is going to come when you can look at a handheld, scan a barcode, and it is going to show you a red, yellow, or green circle that essentially says, buy this, it's green and sustainable, or screw this product, you don't want to touch it, or yellow, here's another product you might wish to consider. On that day, content within the internet will move markets. Now, I realize I'm talking to a lot of people that are smarter than I am in the cyber arena. I'm more like a pissed off end user. I was on the artificial intelligence staff of the Central Intelligence Agency in the Office of Information Technology. I did one of the only functional requirements surveys they've ever done. Generally, the IT world and the US government just throws money at a contractor. The contractor writes the statement of work, and the government buys whatever shit they can't sell to anybody else. This is really scary stuff. Do not underestimate the ignorance of U.S. government contracting officers and contracting officer technical representatives, of whom I was one. The approach to cyberspace today among institutions is institutionalized idiocy. This is the red part here. Now, I recommend to everyone the work of Robert Garrigue. And if you go to phibetaiota.net, you can look him up. He and I together put together this green alternative approach to cybersecurity. And Robert, who unfortunately died at about the age of 50, I miss him very much, understood that security is not about control. Security is about trust. And someone got a Nobel Prize for demonstrating that trust lowers the cost of doing business. What we have today is a world in which trust has been killed. Now, I want to put you on, as I draw to my close, to the ideas of others. These are two of the most important books that I have read recently, Governing the Commons. She received a Nobel Prize. This is about hybrid governance that is based on shared information and ethical evidence-based decision support. Today in Washington, as most of you know, decisions are made on the basis of who pays to be heard. They are not made on the basis of sound facts and good judgment. And we allow that to happen. When Newt Gingrich destroyed Speaker Wright, a story told in The Power and the Ambition, Congress abdicated its Article I responsibility for checks and balances. Congressmen became foot soldiers for their parties, and they no longer represent their constituents. In fact, they no longer understand the issues. They're simply told how to vote. And their staff isn't worth much either. So we have some issues to deal with. Now, all of these links here that I'm showing, good, thank you. All of these links that I'm showing, I ended up by accident being the #1 Amazon reviewer for nonfiction. And I discovered in about 2005, when I finally had a chance to have a townhouse for my library, that was before I lost everything, that I read in 98 categories. And you can find all of that at Phi Beta Iota under the page for books. But here are some lists of reviews. 10 high-level threats, core policies, books on true cost economics, books on all the opens, and then positive and negative book reviews, and then of course 9/11, which if we have a Q&A, I will be glad to talk about. I really respect the thoughts of others. And when I stand before you today with my own commentary, it is standing on the shoulders of thousands of other people whose works I have read. Amazon may have some issues, but I think Amazon could be the hub of the world brain one day. The top authors, the top reviewers, the top readers, based on geospatial locality. And so I encourage everyone to take advantage of what Amazon offers in the way of reviews of books. Now this is the result, and I don't know why this is screwing up my slides. But this is the result of 25 years worth of thinking. And I'll let you study it later. Essentially, we have to integrate education, intelligence, and research. You can't have smart spies in a dumb nation. You can't have a smart nation with dumb spies. And right now we have a dumb nation in every possible sense of the word. We here are the survivors. Governance must be hybrid in nature. The US government is sadly ignorant about everything. And part of the problem is it doesn't care. Paul Pilar has written a book about how intelligence doesn't matter in Washington because decisions are not based on intelligence, never mind the fact that intelligence doesn't actually know anything useful. General Tony Zinni is on record as saying that when he was commander of the Central Command, he got, at best, 4% of what he needed to know from our $80 billion a year secret sources and methods community. And one of the dirty little secrets of NSA, apart from the fact that the Chinese have been riding the electrical wires in for the last 10 years, is that they process less than 1% of what they collect. Don't worry about mass surveillance. Mass surveillance is really just code for spending a shitload of money without accountability. That's what NSA does. And I credit William Binney with this. NSA moves money so that Congress can get its 5% kickback. That's what this is all really about. It's not really about mass surveillance. Now, this is what I would like to build. I'm glad to be here in the New York School. Nothing would please me more than to have some serious people in New York City take an interest in turning New York into the home of the World Brain Institute. with a global serious game, a center for public intelligence. There is plenty of money out there. We have multi-billionaires throwing $500 million chunks at getting better forms of soy because they've decided to improve their diet. What we can't find is multi-billionaires interested in creating a smart nation. And I don't know how to do that. I am a complete failure at business and fundraising. And so I give you these ideas of mine, hopeful that you might be able to take them and show them to somebody, because eventually the world brain will be a self-sustaining enterprise that makes money. I've said for 20 years, information costs money, intelligence makes money. I would be willing to pay 1% of every transaction if I could turn to my handheld device and receive decision support in relation to that transaction. Now, a few of us have fought for 25 years. I'm 61 today. I started this fight in 1988 when I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command, and I had top secret everything, and I had one little PC in the corner going to the internet. And back in 1988, the internet was called The Source, okay, kind of the early version. My analysts started standing in line for the internet, and I said, what are you doing? I just spent $20 million so you could have the best of everything, including access to all the secrets. There's nothing in the secret databases about Haiti or Burundi or Somalia or any of the other practical things we need to know on a day-to-day basis. The reality is the secret world doesn't focus on everything. I wrote an article for Counterpunch called Intelligence for the President and Everybody Else. The secret world is long overdue for being put out of business. We need to create a public intelligence agency. And I have actually gotten OMB to agree twice to an open source agency that would not only nurture open source intelligence, but all of the opens. In fact, all Hunter needs is $100 million to create his public dark fiber around the country. $100 million is chump change in Washington. But you have to find a coalition willing to support it. Now, I have posted my correspondence to the Vice President, which I don't believe reached the Vice President, although I have a certified mail receipt. I'm quite sure that his intelligence community minder intercepted that correspondence and destroyed it. However, I have made it public. And I hope that one day the Vice President will hear from one of his constituents and learn that his mail is being controlled. We are not the only people who are being screwed over. Congress and the White House are being surveilled and screwed over. And they haven't completely figured that out yet. So there is an opportunity to create a smart nation. Now, this is my last slide. I happen to be a fan of the United Nations despite its horrific problems. Basically, the United Nations consists of 1/3 nepotism, 1/3 spies, and 1/3 really good people carrying the burden for everybody else. One of whom is in the audience, maybe. I actually worked for the UN. And if there's one place that's more corrupt than the US government, it's the UN. But they have enormous potential. I believe that the United Nations is a place where, and New York City, is a place where we can create an autonomous internet, a mindset and a culture of open source everything, and we can take liberation technology to the nth degree. And what that means is free energy. Free energy has been around for quite a while. And if you go to Phi Beta Iota, I commend to you Sepp Hasselberger, without an E, H-A-S-S-L and then Berger. Sepp Hasselberger is a curator for alternative energies. We have many such minds all over the world. So let me stop there. I regret that I could not bring copies of my Open Source Everything Manifesto, but if you look up Open Source Everything Manifesto, you'll find as much as you can find free online. And the book is on sale at Amazon. Again, I regret doing that. But what I think I will do is I'm going to send David a watermarked electronic copy of the book. And so if anyone wants an electronic copy of the book with my apologies for the watermark, send David an email. And president at ISOC-NY.org. You should be able to find that. All right, let me stop there. I am very grateful for the invitation, and I'm now going to turn it over to the organizers who will organize our remaining minutes together.
Well, we're open for questions first, so let's just open this up for Q&A first.
All right, Q&A. Whoever shouted Q&A gets the first question.
Okay, yeah, today is the opening of the 9/11 Museum. And,
oh!
I just, if there's something liberating that can be said, I mean, especially when a lot of times I've been using the words, you can't handle the truth.
All right, well, you can handle the truth. If you go to Phi Beta Iota, or if you actually just look up 9/11 convergence, you will find the best information I've been able to put together on 9/11, including stuff from Richard Gage and others. We were warned by 13 countries in advance of 9/11. 3 months prior to 9/11, Dick Cheney ordered a national counterterrorism exercise for the entire nation for the day. The FEMA Emergency Center was set up on the piers of New York the night before 9/11. The dogs were removed from the buildings 2 weeks prior to 9/11 and not returned. Larry Silverstein, with the collaboration of the insurance companies, executed a $7 billion insurance scam. Okay? The 3 WTC buildings were brought down by controlled demolitions. The Pentagon was hit by a missile, which allegedly wiped out the computers that held all the data on the missing $2.3 trillion, which Rumsfeld was being grilled about the day before by Cynthia McKinney. So on 9/11, what I will tell you is I cannot convict, nor do I wish to. I'm a truth and reconciliation guy. I am not about vindictive justice. I'm about get the truth on the table and let's move on. All right? But on 9/11, I can tell you with absolute certainty and with a salute toward Rupert, who suicided himself, perhaps to give his family the life insurance before his term ran out, there is ample evidence to indict Rudy Giuliani, Larry Silverstein, and Dick Cheney. And the 9/11 investigation was a goddamn sham. It was a cover-up. It was as worthless as the Warren Commission. So that's it on 9/11.
Well, okay, so we have this presented narrative, and then we have people who've chosen to lift up the curtain. What can you say in the meta picture of, well, what are the implications of that? What are the ramifications? And rather than just getting upset, what can we do about it?
Well, let me give you this.
Counter-narrative and counter-frame.
Let me throw in Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing and go back to JFK and Martin Luther King. The JFK assassination has now unraveled completely. We now know that Lyndon Baines Johnson was central to this, that he met with Edgar Hoover and a bunch of Texas oil people and New York money people and the Cuban mafia based in New Orleans, and essentially, and the Israelis, the Mossad. Rubin was in Dallas. George Bush was in Dallas on the day of the assassination. This is now clearly known. And I would love to see the day when George Bush Sr. is faced with truth and reconciliation, and Rubin as well, if he hasn't died already. I forget which one of those guys died. Kennedy basically picked a fight with everybody, including Israel on nuclear materials that CIA was smuggling out through Mexico. He was going up against the New York banks. He was going up against the mafia. He and Khrushchev were actually having discussions about completely reducing the nuclear stockpile. And they were both commiserating with one another because their biggest enemy was their own generals. All right? Martin Luther King was killed by an army sniper on detail to the FBI. This is a book told in this is a story told in a book called Act of State. And the King family won this confession from the US government in a federal court about 10 years ago. All right? Now, what is happening here is it's all starting to unravel. Sandy Hook was an unoccupied school. This was a DHS exercise. the key actor, the so-called father, has been discovered and outed, including his sideburns still showing from the tan lines from when he shaved to dress up for the part. Boston bombings. The priests and rabbis that rushed to comfort the victims were held back. They weren't allowed to get near anybody. Why? Because these were all actors. The amputee that was the star of the show was on hire from a company that specializes in providing amputees with blood makeup for military exercises. Now let me throw in pedophilia, which is huge in New York, and it's huge in Boston, and it's huge in Washington, D.C. And some of you may have heard about the Franklin scandal in Kansas City. I personally think that pedophilia is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. The U.S. public is in massive denial on just how corrupt its elite are. And pedophilia is considered an elite privilege. So all of this stuff, in my view, is bubbling up and starting to come together. And I don't know when it will break. But there will come a day when the public wakes up and says, oh my God. And I don't know what will happen. I hope it will be nonviolent. I personally believe that we can and should achieve a nonviolent revolution. I personally believe that we should be extraordinarily tolerant and that we should deeply, deeply grasp the principles of truth and reconciliation. Although Nelson Mandela sold out the gold mines and a few other things, I love the man. He set an example. So in my view, we're within 5 years of a wake-up public moment, and I hope I live to see it. Shall we stop there and get questions from others, or what do you want to do?
Sure, let's see. More questions?
Or I can just stop?
Yeah.
Yes,
No,
sir? First the gentleman in the black shirt, and then in front of you.
Yes. Do you know about the main core program?
No, I do not know about the main core program.
Okay.
So let's skip to another question.
Have you read or looked about the trivia method of learning from like Tragedy at Home Communications website?
No,
Richard
but I'm
Grohl, John
fascinated.
Tagliato.
The trivia method of learning sparks, I just did a letter to the CEO of Pearson Education. Turns out Pearson Education is not just an SAT testing company. It now tutors people. And the same people that score the tests tutor the people. And they have a global network of people. They're like a CIA for normal people in a possible sense. And what the 24 people, I was number 24, what the 24 people who created Earth Intelligence Network came to the conclusion, back when I had money and I could fund all this, was that the 5 billion poor, the brains of the 5 billion poor are the one unlimited resource we have on this planet. And oh, by the way, a brain is 1,000,000 times more energy efficient than any computer existing or likely to exist in the next 20 years. Singularity is crap, as far as I'm concerned. And this new artificial intelligence thing is crap, okay? The 5 billion rich, the 5 billion poor do not have 18 years to sit in a classroom and learn how to be good prisoners. So what we have to do is offer them a chance to learn from their cell phones, one cell call at a time. And so the concept that I have is that on a daily basis, you'll get a fun prompt that will give you elementary education. You will have call centers and diasporas, such as Crisis Mappers uses to translate Haitian Creole into English and then post it on a map. So you will be able to call a center of the diaspora and get any question answered, free, okay? And then at the same time, and this is where Pearson is moving in useful new directions, it turns out education isn't that useful for a lot of people. Skills are. We call that training. So I see video training coming to the point where you can dial in and say, I have a broken Romanian engine, and this part has broken. How do I fix it? And you pull up a 5-minute video on your cell phone that tells you how to remove the part and how to put up an internet appeal for a spare part, such that, for example, a Romanian engineer, because in Africa there are a lot of 1950s Romanian engines, a Romanian engineer will say, well, we no longer make this part, but I have a lathe, I will make this part. And then a German comes in and says, I will pay to FedEx this part to the nearest capital city. And an NGO person comes in and says, I will deliver this part and post a photo of mission accomplished. Okay? So for me, when you ask a question about trivial learning, what you're really talking about is education one fact at a time. One answer at a time. That's the direction we have to go in. Massive online open courses don't work. They have a 4% graduation rate. Okay? They're largely a waste of time. And they're basically Rushkoff. Russell Akoff would tell you, massive online courses are an example of doing the wrong thing righter. Okay? Doing the right thing is what Earth Intelligence Network designed and what your question implies. David, I'm at your service, or I can stop. Ted?
Anyone else, Bernie?
Hang on, you had your chance. Gender?
We have 10 more minutes.
We need a question from a lady? Do we have a lady with a question? Come on, I'm begging you.
I will ask.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to combine.
As you stated that when you're talking about education and how do we educate the poor and the powerless in developing countries. So what I'm hearing you say that really we need to look at new technology in order to look at skill-based education is the driving force for the future. Is that where we need to go instead of looking
Everything converges. Everything converges. For instance, I like Google's gray box phone, but I'm also a huge fan of OpenBTS. OpenBTS stands for Open Base Transceiver Station, which stands for free cell phones. I believe that we should give every person on the planet a free cell phone for life. Now, I think NSA will pay for that because it means that we have their phone number. Okay? So there's always a trade-off. Okay? But the bottom line here is that if you give every person a free cell phone for life, you then monetize their questions or their warnings. One of the issues we have in India and other places is dead birds. So what happens if every person who sees a dead bird takes a picture and sends it in with a geospatial location and a time and date stamp? You have got warning of a disease that money cannot buy. All right? So essentially, you're harnessing the distributed intelligence of the whole Earth. All right? So what I would say to you is, on the one hand, we've got technology becoming affordable. On the other hand, we have a new economic perspective. It's like Gillette. Sell the shave, not the razor. Give them the razor. Okay? And don't charge them for the answers. Charge someone else for the questions. Okay? And then finally, have a completely shifted mindset about what does it mean to be educated. I have very low emotional IQ. Okay? One of my colonels once said, I have the ability to piss off an inanimate object in the next room. Okay? And it's a gift. It really is. And so I apologize for that. But the reality is what they need to learn is they don't need to learn algebra. They need to learn how to get the price of oranges in the next town. They need to learn how to do drip agriculture. They need to learn that 5 cents spent on chlorine in the water of their children stops diarrhea. Okay? So I have goosebumps, okay? I'm very excited. I think the convergence of technology and new thinking and need and a realization that the heart, I lectured Brent Scowcroft, and if you look up Steele Scowcroft on YouTube, you'll get right to my 3-minute lecture. Nothing the United States of America does in the next 25 years matters unless we get our act together and we create an analytic model, a holistic analytic model with true cost economics, and we figure out how to educate and inform and embrace and nurture the 5 billion poor. Because Brazil and China and India and Indonesia and Iran and Russia and Venezuela and wild cards like Malaysia and Turkey and Nigeria, they are the future. Lee Kuan Yew, Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore got it right. Demography, not democracy, is the future. All right? And if we want to see a good future, then we have to see what's going on in Indonesia which has done a very fine job of maintaining a secular government with respect for the Islamic traditions. All right? So skills and parts related and location related, I mean, there's all of this stuff converging. The problem is that the government, the banks, and the corporations are fighting to the bitter end. They absolutely do not want to change. And I have another 20 years left in me. If I had to do it over again, I think I would start in Maine or New Hampshire. And I would basically work my way out, and I would try and take every village off the grid, and then I would start putting legislators in who would nullify every federal regulation. For example, meatpacking regulations are designed to put the small town butcher out of business. Mega agriculture, mega energy, mega health, all of this, 50% inefficiency, 5% pork to the congressman, 5% payoff to every congressman. All of this is bad for us. So as I draw to my final 20 years, I've come to believe that bottom-up resilience is the only way to go, that we need to focus on the intersection of free energy, which allows for water distillation and cleaning. I actually did a project for Somalia where I was able, in theory, to resettle 1 million Somalis on a deserted part of the Somali coast, and I was able to give them free water, free energy, free water, free telecommunications, and a startup hydroponics and goat tending industry for $500 per person. $500 million. Okay, to resettle 1 million Somalis and give them a full-up village with the basic, and all of you have heard of the open source ecology, the global village construction set, where they solve the two biggest problems you have in any population, which is creating free houses using dirt and water, and they have rain harvesting and water desalination, plus every house has a compost toilet so that you don't need central sewage and you don't need central water. All right, that's a very long answer, I apologize, but I'm very excited by the future.
But I'm glad, thank you for sharing with me. Do you see coming out with a best practice based on the model that you're speaking of? Will that be the way to go?
I think other smarter people are going to do good things that will very rapidly catch fire. And one of the issues I have with the United States is everyone's hung up on creating smart apps for smartphones owned by smart rich people. I would really focus on simpler apps for simpler phones for simpler people, because my focus is the 5 billion poor, not the 1 billion rich. I have a wife and 3 kids, so I can't just pick up and move to India. But I believe that others will. And I also believe that the future is found in the pedagogy of freedom, the idea of participatory budgeting, the refusal of people to accept corruption on the part of their local government. I'm sorry that's a long-winded answer, but it's a good time to be alive. All right, I think, yes, sir.
So Main Core is a database. It's a database of, as of 2008, 8 million Americans that will be interrogated or detained.
Is my name on it?
8 million dissidents. 8 million dissidents.
Is my name on it?
It probably is. You're a dissident, yeah.
No,
Main Core is,
I'm a loyal, constructive critic. You know, I got to tell you, I opened the Hackers Conference in 1994, Hackers on Planet Earth. And I used to say that given a choice between incompetence and conspiracy, always go with incompetence, okay? Now, these days, I distinguish between good people trapped in a bad system. 90% of the US government is good people trapped in a bad system, living from paycheck to paycheck, okay? Now, at the very top, you have politicals who respond to money, and you have political appointees who respond to money, and you have flag officers and senior executive officers who respond to money. And we don't have a counterintelligence system in the United States. I will tell you right now, the FBI is about cosmetics. It's about chasing little people. It's not about actually putting ideological, religious, and financial traitors in jail. Okay, they're more of a protective service. For example, taking the pedophilia axis between Boston, New York, and Washington, you never see the FBI touch that. Now, part of that is because there's a deep state within the US government. These are people who self-select and recruit and promote from within. And essentially, when John Deutsch, the director of the CIA, went to Los Angeles and said, I knew nothing about the crack cocaine explosion and the import of cocaine from Nicaragua and Ricky Ross doing great things, $2 million a day, Deutsch was telling the truth, okay? CIA has elements within CIA that get military call signs for contractor planes that fly into El Toro Air Base and unload cocaine, and they're basically given a free pass. And this is part of national security, off-budget funding, and so forth. All right? So the institutions themselves are actually trying to do the best they can, but they are penetrated. They have limpet fish within them that can take the institutions and make them do evil things. Let me stop there. Yes, sir.
What do you think about Lawrence Lessig's Mayday PAC and getting money out of politics?
Well, Lawrence and I have talked about this, and I've told Lawrence that getting money out of, the question was, what do I think about Lawrence Lessig's idea about getting money out of politics, all right? It doesn't matter. As long as you have a two-party tyranny that can block everybody else from getting on the ballot and can make most people's votes not count, it doesn't matter, all right? Money is a tiny, tiny part of the corruption that infects our electoral system. I actually ran for president because I was unemployed, and it was fun to see how much money I could raise in 6 weeks, because I wanted to put all the good ideas in one place, bigbatusa.org, and because I wanted to be able to write a letter to all the other small party candidates and see if I could get them to come together around the one thing we can all agree on, which is electoral reform. I wanted to have an electoral reform summit. I wanted to have occupy the home offices of all senators and congressmen and force them to understand that if they did not pass electoral reform, which means essentially all parties and all independents on every ballot for federal office, then we would run them out of town on a rail. And I couldn't get that to happen. Electoral reform is actually 11 different points. If you look up the Electoral Reform Act on the internet, one of the things I found when I did the intervention with Occupy, it's a 6-minute tape. If you look up Steele Electoral Reform Occupy YouTube, you'll get right to it. Is that when I did that, people came out of the woodwork, and inside of a week, I had crowdsourced an Electoral Reform Act. Because everybody that mattered, that really cared passionately about electoral reform, jumped out of the woodwork and said, oh, wait a minute, but you forgot this, and you forgot this, and you forgot this, okay? There are 11 things that need to be in an Electoral Reform Act. Money is one of them. So I love Lawrence Lessig. I think he's great, but he's focusing on a tiny part of the problem. And this is why holistic thinking matters, okay? Essentially, with holistic thinking, you have to attack all of the cancers at the same time. You can't just attack one, otherwise it's like whack-a-mole, okay? Does that answer your question? All right, I think what, one more question and we stop? All right, let's stop there. It's 9 o'clock. They're throwing us out of the building. And I thank you, and I'm just really glad to be here, and I'll tell you, I feel positive about New York City. I feel positive about everybody in this room. I feel positive about everybody on live stream. And by God, if there's one book you want to read, or if there's one book review you want to read my review of a book called, and let me end on this note, it's called The Average American, okay? This journalist went out and spent 2 years looking for the average American. He finally found this guy, 18-month mark. He decided if he doesn't write me or email me or nag me, then he's the average American. And the guy didn't, so he went back at the 2-year mark, and he said to this guy, he said, you're the average American. And the guy said, wow, what an honor. Exactly. Thank you.